All right, what's going on? Welcome to the Electorate Political Talk Radio. How y'all doing? What's going on, Prince?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, man, loud and clear, man.
How's- yeah, I had to run to get out of the makeup chair to get here. So
Okay. Well, man, it's good to see you, man. First of all, man, I gotta ask you. I'm gonna ask you on air, but you ain't got to answer. How was Vegas, man?
what happens in Vegas
Stays
stays in
in
Vegas.
Vegas, that's right.
But no, it was a good time. It was just a little getaway for a little bit, and just enjoying the sun and the clean air. And I can say that like during my time there, I actually felt good. Like no sinus issues, nothing. But when I came back to the South with all this humidity, it's coming back up again.
I understand.
So hey, but it was a great trip though. So hey, I can't complain one bit. But I'm glad to be home and glad to be on with y'all.
Good, man. Well, it's been an interesting 24 hours to say the least. But hey, man. Hey, we blessed. We here. Glad to be here. I'm excited to have EB on tonight. He's going to be joining us a little bit later. So the notorious EB. So looking forward to his perspective on the culture. So that's why we're here, man. So, man, we might as well go on and get to it. What you think?
Hey, let's do it.
Cool. Well, all right. Well, welcome to the Electorate Political Talk Radio. It is 6:30 Central Time, a little bit after that. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This is defining the culture. So tonight we're going to talk about what the culture is, who defines it, and how the culture impacts us. So let's get started. So Prince, tell me, man, what when you think of the culture, to you, what is the culture? And I'll give my definition too after you.
Well, the thing about it is, I guess we don't have, when you think about Black people, we don't have one homogenous culture. Oh, to tell the truth, I guess we're just a blend of many different cultures and experiences. But the thing is, we can't say that, we're like English ancestry, or we have like French ancestry or anything like that. It's like a lot of people can kind of trace back to where they came from exactly. But with us, we can't do that. So like our culture is that we're Black.
Right.
We're Black.
That's
we're
our
Black.
homeland.
Yeah, especially. I mean, we all, of course, we have African ancestry, but Africa is not just a homogenous place where we all just came from like one set culture in Africa. We've come from Africa, different cultures on the continent of Africa. But
like when people say go back to Africa, like where? Which one? It's like y'all know how big Africa is. I mean, we have to get a blood test just to see which part of Africa we came from. Oftentimes,
I mean, and that's not just saying that it's 100% accurate. I mean, but it's close to accurate as you can get. But
that's right.
A lot of us know that we come from pretty much a lot of us come from the west coast of Africa. So I mean, but that's about as much as they can kind of narrow it down. They can say that maybe some of us have Nigerian heritage, from Sierra Leone or from Ghana. I mean, but yeah. So of course we come from the continent of Africa. But when we come,
while we on that topic, I know we got plenty of time. I'm kind of going off the reservation a little bit.
I'm prepared for that now.
Man, have you ever thought about traveling to Africa? And if so, what part? I would love to travel to Nigeria, Lagos, Accra, Ghana, parts of Cape Town, South Africa, Egypt. I would love to travel to some of those places. Have any of those places kind of piqued your interest? And how does African culture kind of integrate itself into our topic tonight? We talk about Wakanda and all the things that are going on in the culture now. How does African culture kind of impact us as Black Americans?
Well, I
Putting you
mean,
on the spot here tonight.
I know. Well, I mean, of course, a lot of us, we know that we come from, like, we have African ancestry. We don't really know exactly where we come from. Because actually, for myself, I want to try one of those ancestry DNA tests just to see just to get some sort of idea where I come from.
Right. A sense of our heritage and everything.
Yeah, a sense of our heritage. Like I said, a lot of us, we just can't just pinpoint exactly like, oh, this is where my great grandfather came from, or great grandmother. But
my family, we did a genealogy study, and I'm 99% sure it was right, because I did an independent study. My cousin did an independent study, and we both traced back to the same name. And it was a sharecropper in North Carolina, and that's where the trail goes cold. After that, the records, you can trace back to maybe the early 1800s, but before that, man, it's tough for us to kind of trace our roots beyond that. Literally depending on handwritten scribble, of folks that didn't necessarily have our best interest in mind.
Exactly.
So,
but that's just the only thing we have. That's the only thing we have for the most part. But
and even some of the government records aren't the best when you talk about tracing back that far.
And then, like I said, for myself, I can probably just say that my grandmother, my father's side, she come from Fayette, Alabama, but that's about as far as I know where. But that's because I haven't really done a lot of research on it, so just to see exactly where I come from. But my grandmother on my mom's side, she told me that her mom was a Creek Indian, but I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying that she's lying or nothing, but I mean that's just what she was told, but I probably will check that out myself, just kind of to see what's my story, where I come from. But I guess we
talk about some records that's really missing, because a lot of us as Black folks, we all say we got Indian in our family, or more politically correct Native American. But we've heard that for years, but it's hard to prove it, because there's some benefits involved. When you talk about being a Native American in the South, there's land and there's tribal resources. And, we've had some relatives to kind of look into it, because, we've heard for years, we might be part Native American. We've got some Native American in our family, and we got ancestors that look just like Native Americans, minus the headdress and everything. So, we share some of those, characteristics, but it's just the paperwork ain't there. So it's for lack of a better term. So you can't really know. And then, we all mixed up. We are melting pot,
exactly.
in and of ourselves. But to me, the culture is, man, it's the way we interact with one another. It's the catchphrases, how we talk, how we express ourselves. It's fashion. It's our music. It's our talents. And people I hear people joke all the time, everybody loves Black culture, but they don't necessarily love Black people.
Yeah.
But our culture is so popular. Yeah, you can make the argument that nothing on TV today or in music today, can be successful without some aspect, of our culture and our talents. You can make a strong argument. And I love the culture. I think it's good. You can look at some of the, other aspects that we'll get into here in a moment. But what are some of the things that you think kind of influence, our culture? And I can't wait for EB to get here, because I know he's gonna have
he has a dictionary of terms, a thesaurus that he'll probably throw at us. But
right.
but I think that our culture, like, we're a resilient culture, and then I feel like we actually add a little spice to the greater culture. I feel. I mean, just our like I said, our just talents all over, like our talents as in the arts, talents in science, talents in athletics, talents in just general philosophy and arts and sciences, and also. But like I said, I think that a lot of the culture is influenced by the I guess by celebrities. I mean, when you think about it, like growing through the different decades, like a lot of our culture was emulated by what a lot of people saw, like what celebrities did. Like back in the 30s and 40s, you had like the athletes, and then
so we try to dress like them. We see something on TV or on a movie, and we was like, man, I gotta get that suit Eddie Murphy had on in Boomerang.
Exactly.
That's clean, man. I got to have that.
I mean, when you think about it, it's from.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about a lot of this. There's a lot of celebrity influence that into the culture that kind of shapes what we have been through, like I said, through those different years, those different decades. Like, I guess, like during the 50s and 60s, during the time, Temptations, Motown, and all that.
Yeah,
doing
slick back,
and all. I mean, and then when you think about the 70s, it was all the bell bottoms, the fros, and everything else, and then the 80s, we probably dressing like Michael Jackson, and and then a cameo, and when we get to the 90s, we're in we're in the tracksuits and the
Kangos, yes.
And then when you get to 2000s, there's even a culture there. I mean, when you think about the white tees and the
there's so many people today infatuated with the 90s. And they try to age us and say y'all came up in the late 1900s.
It was a golden age. I mean, when you think about it,
it really was though.
It really was.
And it's funny how we made in the 2000s we kind of made fun of the 90s. It's crazy how things kind of make a comeback almost. And I remember I was in my apartment on campus, and back at the University of Alabama, and I had an old leather jacket that my dad had given me like years ago. I had raided his closet before I went to college, and I took this leather jacket, right? Never really wore it because I didn't know. I was like, yeah, that's a fine jacket. I might do something with that. Maybe we have a 70s party or something. And so I've had that jacket for years, and it just happened to be hanging up in my apartment. And this young lady, she was trying to take my doggone leather jacket. So that jacket is hot. Let me have that. Nah, you can't have that.
No, this is
that's a family heirloom. Yeah. But I hadn't thought twice about that jacket, man. And this was in the 2000s. And I know my dad, he probably hadn't worn that jacket. I know probably since the 70s. Easy.
Yeah, now it's like what they call it, it's retro,
it's retro. Crazy.
I mean, back in the day when we were in school, what we were talking about when I know I saw this personally, and like people get cracked on like having high water pants and tight
you couldn't show ankles back when we were in school or high school.
What I'm gonna come to school with like high water pants up to about over my ankles, but now today
you would get run out of here, and not everybody got. If you showing not enough ankle, you getting roasted now.
So look at those. Look at that heel. Well, you can't see your ankles.
And I couldn't imagine not having on socks with my shoes. But it's funny how
today it's the fashion trend today. I mean,
I don't know if it's fashion designers, but people are setting these. I was reading an article about Tommy Hilfiger, and there was some missing. And Tommy Hilfiger, to his credit, is probably the victim of one of the most egregious misinformation campaigns before misinformation became a thing, right? Because
this is before social media.
Pre-social media, Tommy Hilfiger was the victim of a misinformation campaign. And I know everybody probably has heard it that he didn't make his clothes for black folks. He went on Oprah Winfrey allegedly and said that if he had known that black people gonna wear his clothes, he wouldn't have made them so nice. Fact check: Tommy Hilfiger never ever said that. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. If you look up his history, he was sending boxes of free Tommy Hilfiger gear to rappers, singers, entertainers. One of the most popular pictures of Aaliyah, she in this fire yellow Tommy Hilfiger suit. and on stage, and you can see numerous. I think Snoop Dogg was on Saturday Night Live in a Tommy Hilfiger long sleeve shirt. So I mean, these fashion designers, they know the power, have always known the power of the culture, and they set the culture almost.
And we're all affected by it, because I remember when I was young, man, we were all young. We all were susceptible to what we see from what our friends wore, or what people that we looked up to who were cool wore. But myself, I remember buying a $75 Tommy shirt. I mean, you're a young kid, you barely have money yourself, and you're up here trying to buy a $75 Tommy shirt. I mean, but it shows you how susceptible we all were to that. I mean, and even in our adulthood, a lot of us are susceptible to what the influences are in our lives about what we consider as the culture of the day. So,
and I want to talk about Michael Jordan. He basically had all of us trying to buy $100 pairs of sneakers. And I got an interesting story. Now, complete transparency, I've never owned a pair of Jordans. I don't say that to brag or boast or anything. I've seen some that I liked. But I guess I just got PTSD, man, because when I was in high school, it wasn't a pair of Jordans, but I had bought a pair of those Junior Seau's. They were clean too. I think I posted them online. They had a white core, a blue top, and a black strap across. Man, you couldn't tell me that I wasn't the cleanest person at the high school. This was my freshman year of high school that I had saved up. Man, I had worked hard all summer to get these shoes. Exactly. And I was like, man, when I bought these shoes, I was like, and they were over $100. That's the only pair of $100 shoes I had ever bought up until that point. And I was like, as hard as I worked for them, because my parents weren't having it. They were like, well, we not finna buy you, a $100 pair of shoes.
You go and pay for that yourself.
You'll pay for. But what you can do is, you work hard over the summer. We'll pay you some allowance, and you can buy it with your own money. It's the same thing with the any clothes or in like Super Nintendos or any expensive item that I wanted to buy, my parents would not buy it. Not in high school. But they said they did give me an opportunity to work for it. Because they did pay me a little bit of an allowance. You cutting grass and you got your little odd jobs, and you realize how hard you gotta work for some of this stuff. And it got to a point, I don't even care about any Jordans, man. I gotta work too. You know how much grass I gotta cut? You start thinking about things in terms of what you gotta do to get it. And that was instilled in me, at an early age. And so now, I think the culture is very lucrative. I love to see us getting money. But at the same time, when you see kids, getting shot over sneakers or robbing and stealing, trying to keep up with the latest trends, trying to keep up with the culture. I think that's kind of where, we have to kind of try to draw a line in the sand, and go ahead and comment on that.
There's nothing wrong with buying Jordans. I mean, if you can afford to do it, I mean, no problem. But even if you can't, it's your money. If that's what you want to do with it, that's what you do. But also when I am aware that when people talk about the buying the Jordans and everything, there's a culture with the sneakerheads. I mean, sneakerheads. Yeah. There's also a business. They always they keep the Jordans as more of a financial investment in their eyes. I mean, a lot of those resales. I mean, it can be. But
right.
The thing is, that takes time. But I mean, it's not for me to judge it or not judge it. But if that's what you want to do, and you're successful in it, you know how to get them on the market to sell. I mean, that's your business.
My brother is fact checking me on my history. He said we had that Jordan Cologne though. He ain't lying. We did have that Jordan Cologne now.
And I had Curve and Juke growing up.
He said we had to put our money together to buy that Super Nintendo too. He said, I think our daddy threw in the tax because we didn't have enough money. I remember the day we bought that Super Nintendo, and it was $100. We had saved up $100 exactly. And we got to the cash register, and I think it might have been 110, 120. I think my dad threw in the rest.
All right, I'll throw it in. I'll throw that
in. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special guest that's about to join us. EB is in the building, baby. So we gonna bring him on. What's going on, EB?
Gentlemen, how are you?
Oh man, you sound good, man. Sound good. How you doing?
Good.
So, on your just previous exchange about the Jordans and all that, and how that's a financial investment, historically, that's very prescient, I guess, or directly related. So, for instance, previously, when people in the culture, or let's just say Black folks, had less access to banking, or were less savvy about things such as the stock market, or didn't have access to real estate investments. Their investments were in things like jewelry and expensive items that could be later pawned. And so this is sort of I'm just giving a little historical precedent for this sort of, I guess, aspect of saving or collecting. So I mean, with any sort of collection, there's always some sort of financial investment, or looking for some gain in value of the collection or the items in the collection. So that's just a little historical precedent for, at least that I'm seeing, some connection between.
That's a very good point. I never thought about that way. That's why we got you on here. Yeah, go ahead.
It's like different throughout the years. We collect different things, and we see that have value in it, and then it's just a different way of looking at it. I didn't really think of it, so I'm glad that you brought that to light to us.
Right. So it's funny how EB connected those dots, right? Mm-hmm. We went from talking about how me and my brother, we had to save up all summer to get these things of value, or that are valued by our community. And then my uncle, he chimed in. He said he hadn't had a pair of Jordans since he was 25 or 26, and he's 52. But just how the community, like, I know some sneakerheads that are holding on to some old Jordans, maybe barely worn or lightly worn, and you can see on the auction block, man, they go for thousands of dollars.
Exactly.
So EB makes a very good point. And EB, while we got you, we want to put you on the spot a little bit. What's your definition of the culture, and how does it influence, the community?
Well, I tend to look at things longitudinally. So
come on with it, longitudinally.
That's what I'm talking about. He's going to throw out the thesaurus at us.
Wait, you said I was going to throw out. I was going to throw out what now?
I thought you were going to throw the SARS at us.
Yeah. I got Google Dictionary on lock right now.
Nah.
So I mean, I'm always thinking about how things are connected, and so in terms of the culture, so I look at how things have. At least this is my response: is how things have shifted, how things have changed, how they have stayed the same, how certain aspects of culture have become predominant in different time periods. Did we lose our host?
Oh, you can keep talking.
Okay. Keep talking. So I suppose my definition of the culture would be the aspects of our shared reality so reality, if you believe in a particular theory, reality is socially constructed. So at least amongst the Black community, the culture is our shared vision for, or our shared understanding of where we are, where we want to be, where we see ourselves, where we remember we were, what we see as valuable, what we see as attainable, what we see as useful, what we see as useless. I mean, I know it's a pretty expansive definition and probably not necessarily rigorous enough to
but I guess
base
it's a
any
good
serious
way.
argument on.
It's a good way to track milestones throughout life. You know, it's kind
Right.
of how I interpret your comments. You know, I can remember what I was doing when I was a freshman in college and what we were wearing at the time, what music we were listening to, you know, how the culture impacted us in our 20s and then in our 30s and some of us encroaching upon our early 40s. You know,
Right.
and it's just, you know, it's funny how, like, I remember the day Aaliyah died. I can tell you where I was, what I was doing, who I was talking to, and I think there was a party going on outside the frat house, and me and one of our brothers were watching MTV, and it came across the ticker, and we jumped up because we didn't. No, it didn't just casually scroll across the bottom of MTV. I think it was that Aaliyah had passed away. We're like, no, that's not what that said. Surely that's not what happened.
Well, looking back at that, we had a wild 2 or 3 weeks right there, didn't we? That's a wild 2
And,
well, I mean, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, just how, you know, the culture and how we remember things according to the culture, and then certain milestones and certain events. I didn't even really think about that until just now. How certain events throughout history kind of contribute to the culture. You think about Kurt Cobain and his death, and how people still rapping about that today. You know, in 2021, his name popping up and people using him as an alias. Just certain historical events and how people have lived their lives, and their deaths even contributing to the culture almost.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I would say that, and so, again, some historical precedent. People that were, say, boomers, they remember exactly where they were and what they were doing when Kennedy died.
Right.
And just sort of from a national perspective, pretty much any American will remember where they were when they heard about 9/11. Now, I would say that the Aaliyah comment is a bit of a microcosm of that. That is probably, I wouldn't say integral to the culture. It is certainly a facet of it. So all of you say, well, okay, well, when Aaliyah died, that will only impact a number of people, or people who were necessarily into that type of music, or who were Aaliyah fans. And it's the same as similar for Kurt Cobain, but, you know, again, I almost want to compare it to the crossover culture back in the 60s or 70s. So, you know, like people were less, you had crossover artists, but then you had artists that were known nationally, right? Whereas Aaliyah, right. So Kurt Cobain pretty much, I mean, I don't remember where I was when I heard Kurt Cobain died. I do remember exactly what I was doing where I was when I heard Aaliyah died.
Right.
Now I would say that is probably a marker of this culture of what we're talking about here. So knowing exactly where you were for someone who was, I guess, a culture maker, someone who was, at least for, I don't know, she probably had an essential impact that really spoke to everyone, similar to, say, Tupac and Biggie. You know, they were, we're looking at major figures who, I mean, of course, you know, they're musical artists, and I mean, who can deny that music is a really basic and essential part of what we're talking about is the culture.
And it's interesting because, you know, we talk about where we were when certain people died. I can't tell you where I was when Tupac and Biggie died, but I know it impacted the culture.
Oh, yeah.
Like years down the road, we still talking about their deaths. We still debate on who's the best. You know, we see T-shirts, right, that have Biggie and Pac lyrics on them, like T-bone steak, cheese, eggs, as much as great. You know, and everybody knows what that means or where that came from, right? So I just think it's very interesting how that came to be. And Kobe, and with this COVID stuff, Kobe's death almost kind of, I'm not gonna say it became a footnote, but we got majorly distracted with COVID-19 because he died like right before that. But I can tell you exactly where I was almost to the minute, when I found out Kobe died. And that's something that, I hate to say, some things that might have happened in 2019, early 2020, get kind of foggy because we're dealing with this global pandemic, and even that is going to help define the culture, I think, to a certain extent, or at least contributing to it moving forward.
And then I guess it. What I was just saying, I guess, and then also you think about the summer of during the pandemic with the racial unrest, with the George Floyd murder. I mean, that definitely impacted our culture. It just told us that I guess it kind of gave us the feeling that we were a part of a second civil rights movement. In some way. Like I said, I guess I could put it in the way, like as you look at the beginning of the first civil rights movement was you could say like it's the murder of Emmett Till or the arrest of Rosa Parks that kind of that ignited the flame that set us on the course to the movement. And then you can say right now with the death of George Floyd, that kind of set in motion that the movement to just look at the way that we police, look at the way that we interact with the police, and then our impact in like changing the government or changing the way that the government governs us on a local level, state level, and a federal level. So it's a lot of things that can contribute to the culture, and like I said, I don't think you can just pinpoint just one thing that just gonna just send us on that would just say that this is the thing that will impact the culture. But when you look at it like that, there's always it seems like there's always one event or a couple of events that will spark a different a move on where we move forward as a culture.
Right. So, Evie, go ahead.
So I was going to say that any of these sort of events or that are part of the awareness, that form part of the social awareness, the socially constructive reality that I mentioned previously, they all almost all occur against a backdrop of something. So, for instance, the civil rights movement, we look at that in tandem with the Vietnam War to some degree, but for the most part, because I mean, when you think about the civil rights movement, what's the first thing that comes to mind? You think about dogs and fire hoses and crossing bridges
and the assassinations
and the assassinations, and you think about diners and people getting food thrown on them. Those are the first things that come to your mind. But this is happening against the backdrop of Black soldiers, thousands of Black soldiers being sent to the Vietnam War and essentially used as cannon fodder. I mean, I don't use that term lightly. I have every respect for veterans. My father was a Vietnam veteran, but I've seen what it did to them. So
I have relatives still dealing with some of the things that happened over there. The ones that are still alive, because I know I got some uncles and some folks that I know had died well before their time. They survived the war, but when they got back over here, they weren't right. And that's another whole topic in and of itself.
And my late father, he's a Vietnam veteran, and I saw the effects of the war did to him every single day. But I was thankful he did come back, and if it wasn't for him, I'm not here speaking with you all. So, but I can't see the effects of it that had it over him until the day he died, a couple of years ago. But it's powerful that that they went over there to fight in a war for a country that didn't seemingly respect them or value them as a human being. But
right, and you only ever hear that particular perspective when you're talking about the war. You don't really hear that perspective. That's not the first thing that comes to mind. That's the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about Black men in the Vietnam War. That's not the first thing, or it's not even one of the primary things that comes to mind when you're talking about civil rights. So it's just flipping things to, I guess, looking at it through the culture or looking at it through a particular lens. So I bring that up to say that, to return to the point about COVID versus what was the point you made? What were the cultural events that we were talking about in relation to COVID? So Kobe.
Well, yeah,
right.
How Kobe passed away, and it still bothers me anytime I turn on an NBA game, anytime I hear of a helicopter overhead, it still reminds me of Kobe. But I think with COVID, we were distracted by, like I said, a global pandemic, so we kind of lose some of the impact. Not to say that we don't remember him and contribute or commemorate him, because we do. It's just that with this global pandemic and everything else going on, it kind of almost takes away from some of the significance, if you will, for lack of a better term.
Right. So, I mean, I've seen amongst friends, amongst acquaintances, there's still a very strong Kobe discussion, very strong fans, perspectives on it. But nationally, I would say it's definitely background noise. But I mean, even now, with time passing, it's losing its, Aaliyah is to 9/11 as Kobe is. I would agree with that. Very much.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly.
Wow,
exactly.
that's a good point. That's my brother in the comments. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
That's a real good point.
Wow, I didn't think about it that way. You're right. That's
a strong analogy right there.
Yeah.
No,
so
ahead,
Kobe,
BB.
Yeah. So I was saying Kobe seems to be, it was recognized nationally. It felt like it was just for a moment. It felt like it happened for a fleeting breath of time, and then it was just over, right? Whereas, we're still dealing with this COVID drama, and it's encapsulating almost everything else that we're doing right now, almost every other part of our existence. But then I think, as we move forward, and, like, when you think about Kobe dying, do you think about COVID? When you think about,
it's like it's separate entities almost.
It's almost separate entities, right? But when you think about COVID, you don't think at all, right, about Kobe Bryant. So and I would say that, it's also related to some degree with the perspective of the culture of the shared reality on COVID. So, I mean, is this a major conversation that's happening? Is it not? Is it a consistent conversation? Is it fear? So I can give a example. So last night I was speaking to my father, and he was saying that, oh yeah, I need to get that second shot. I was like, Dad, what? How long ago did you get your? How long ago? Yeah, I mean, it's about time for the booster now. I mean, how long you got the first shot?
Right.
So, I mean, and that's he's from a particular socioeconomic perspective, but still, you have to look at these things as being intertwined, even though we don't really view them reality-wise as such.
Right.
And
go ahead, Prince. Go ahead.
Well, no, I was actually going to kind of lead into what you're talking about with your dad and all about the vaccine. Like, is that a cultural thing about among Black people that we are distrustful of, like just vaccines in general, or this particular vaccine, or like the historical significance of, like, people always bring up the Tuskegee experiment, but I mean, it's not that they were given a vaccine; they were like refused treatment just to see what the effects of syphilis would be on them. And then that kind of leads to the reason why a lot of African Americans don't trust the system. So is that part of the reason with your dad, and then also with other African Americans, that they don't want to, they're not in the rush to get the vaccine?
Well, I wonder to what degree things like the Tuskegee experiment underlie the social consciousness around that, or the cultural memory, I guess you could say. So, I mean, we've all heard about it.
Yes,
right. But none of us.
But we've never been affected. Yeah, we never.
But we weren't affected. Are you related to anyone?
And then also the word of mouth from our parents, and then grandparents, and also so.
Right. So, I mean, and then you also have to look at it in terms of, this is something that's coming from outside of the community, outside of the social awareness, the social reality.
Right.
So, I mean, Prince actually makes a good point, but go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, go ahead, EB.
No, I was finished.
Well, what do y'all think about in terms of, and the great discussion this evening, I want to pivot just a little bit. How do you think the culture impacts our community negatively? Similar to what, positive or negative, depending on how you feel about the vaccine. You could almost say that that's a negative aspect, because the Tuskegee experiment, that's not misinformation, that's historical information. But I would argue that it's misapplied when you talk about the current situation we're in with this global pandemic. But what are some other aspects of the culture that have a negative impact on our community? For example, people always say some of these young kids, maybe we're glorifying violence in some of our music or in some of our movies, Boys in the Hood and, different things. So are we glorifying, negative treatment towards women or things of that nature? How much of the culture is accountable for some of the things going on in the community? And I wanted to see what you all thought about that.
Well, I watched a podcast last night that was, I guess, reviewing the show on Stars No Raising Canaan. It's about the basically about the drug war in New York in the late '80s, early '90s. Just kind of looking at the life of a young man whose family is in the drug business, and then how he came up in it. And then one of the reviewers were talking about like we think about all the rawness that we saw in the show. Like they're talking about how people were killed and people were using drugs and ODing and they're dying. And then just the raw violence that we see on the shows. Like, is that too much for us to see? Like I said, does that hurt the culture? Are we glorifying it too much? But I mean, in my opinion, I don't think we're glorifying it. We're just bringing awareness,
shedding
to
a light on it.
That's
a lot of people argue
that
the culture is just reflective of the reality, and that these things were going on in the community well in advance of rap music and movies and things of that nature. But at the same time, you do have some young people, young impressionable minds who may not necessarily have, a strong family structure that can kind of deter them or teach them the difference between reality and entertainment. Like, I can bob my head to this music, or I can watch this movie, but I don't have to go out here and try to live that. I joke all the time. We used to sneak tapes in and might have had another name on the tape, might have had Johnny Gill or something on the tape, but it was Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, what I'm saying? Because my parents, they didn't let me buy anything with that parental advisory label on it. So you had to kind of sneak it in another way. But I knew I wasn't finna go out there and grab a pistol and try to shoot anybody. Yeah. But I did like to listen to some of that because it was cool. And so sometimes I wonder, for those who may not necessarily have the same, background that I have, what negative impact it has on young and impressionable minds who don't have anyone to steer them away from the alternate reality that's portrayed in some of our culture and with our music and our movies and our entertainment.
Well, I would say we're on dangerous ground here. Maybe not dangerous, but
no, say that. Go ahead.
Say that. Okay.
Yeah.
I would argue.
This is a truth zone.
I would argue that we're on dangerous or contentious ground with this discussion. But let me offer a comparison. It might not be entirely fair, but let me offer a comparison. So let's think about Top Gun. Pretty much everybody's seen Top Gun, right? Top Gun is a 1980s movie about a fighter pilot who, essentially people were saying it glorified war in the military, right? So then let's think about, I don't know, Boys in the Hood, right? So I would say Boys in the Hood, or even better, Menace to Society. I would say
Oh
Menace.
yeah, Menace to Society.
I would say let me use Menace to Society. I would say Menace to Society is supposed to be one of those. If you looked at the analog for that in war movies, would be the war movie that says war is tragic and it's it's supposed to be like an anti-war film or anti-gang life, anti-drug life film is what Menace to Society says to me, right? But then you also have the character, like they slow it down. He's living this life previously when I guess they do slow-mo when he died in New Jack City.
Right.
Yeah, New Jack City is probably a good example, but I guess what I'm trying to say is, so if you look at who dies in Top Gun, right? His best buddy, his co-pilot Goose dies, right? Whereas in these in these other films, the main, I guess you would have to call them the antagonist, or because they're, antagonist. Nino Brown is definitely the antagonist, right?
Yeah.
But
and then there are guys that shot Ricky and
right. So these films, they play dramatic music, and generally they slow down when the main gangster character is dying, or all of those things. But so okay, let's look at when Ricky dies, right? Ricky dies. He's the one who's trying to get out, right?
Yes.
But everybody else pretty much lives. So what does that say to you, or what does that say about trying to do the right thing? And I say that with air quotations, about doing the right thing or trying to find a career path that doesn't involve those things. If you base it solely on that movie, and I'm going to be very reductionist here, and I'm going to oversimplify. So if you look at that movie alone, what does that say to you? It means there is no hope.
Yeah.
It means there is no hope. You're essentially, you have like one opportunity,
or that is really, really rare.
Or yes, that is rare. You're right, but to me, it says that there's no hope, or that what's the term I'm looking for? It's a very cynical look at life and trying to get out of a particular socioeconomic status, or and even then, so he hasn't even gotten to college, or he hasn't even gotten, so he could get injured in his first year and be right back there.
Let me ask y'all this.
It's a very slim chance. Go ahead.
Should there be more representation of, like, we live kind of a different world type path, right? And a lot of, and people talk about how HBCU enrollment like skyrocketed after A Different World. Should we have, is it so much that you have an overrepresentation of the negative? Do we not have enough positive representations? And I'll even take it a step further and say, I kind of felt like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and was a good representation. Uncle Phil and this family in Bel-Air making all this money, and Carlton, Carlton was fresh as hell, man. People were talking like Carlton was a cornball. Carlton dressed how we wanted to dress at step shows.
Yeah, he was, but he was like, he was ahead of the time
he was ahead of the time. Like, should there be more, I guess, representation of positive influences within our culture that we see on sitcoms and movies and even music to a certain extent? Or are we living kind of the boring life? I go to college, we partied and had a good time, and now we got careers. Is that just not cool enough to portray in mass, in TV and film? What do y'all think about that?
I don't know. The thing that comes to mind is Blackish.
Yeah.
It's probably the best,
Or Family Matters.
Yes.
Or, I mean, no, I won't go there.
I already know what you want to say, but we try. I already know.
I will. Let's stick with Family Matters and
right.
Blackish. I mean, even then, those are comedic examples. Which, I mean, I think they're positive examples, but they're still comedic, and they don't necessarily reflect the mundaneness of married family life, and or even trying to maintain a career, and so I think they are good examples. Those are, I would say, good examples.
Right. Well, go ahead, Prince.
I know. I was just thinking about, like I said before, when we was thinking about the 90s, like someone made this told me this, that the 90s were like a golden age. Like when you think about all the black sitcoms that were on television at that time, probably the one that we probably won't
the one we can't talk about anymore.
Right. But I mean, but when you think of it, it was like
that was a positive representation, though. Yeah, very positive.
Exactly. Like that decade, like even in the late 80s and throughout the 90s, that pretty much defined us. I think it defined us as a culture, really. I mean,
and you had black people wanting to be, OBGYNs and attorneys. Like you really had people wanting to do this, after that. And of course, A Different World. And I'm going to throw this one out here, for those of us who spent some summer times at home with grandma and The Young and the Restless, man. When I saw Neil Winters, his corporate brother, like I wanted to be that, So it was important for me to see a brother on The Young and the Restless, up here with Victor Newman and Jack Abbott Nim and all these cats.
No, he wasn't he was an athlete.
Christoph St. John. He wasn't an athlete or anything.
Yeah, he wasn't a drug dealer. He wasn't just some shucking and jiving.
He was corporate brother.
Yep.
It had bad ones all the time. Had plenty of money. It was up here really just holding his own with these corporate guys. He that was inspirational to me. I think I posted that on social media when he passed away, man. Like people underestimate that influence because, man, Neil Winters was that dude. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I guess when we're talking about it, I guess we do need those representations just of successful, black people and just people just success, like, or just strong black families just trying to make it in the world, like we say as you see with like Family Matters, and then the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You said like Aunt Viv was a real one. She's real. Yeah. She's an educated woman, but she was real.
Both of them. Dark skin Aunt Viv and light skin Aunt Viv were real ones.
They were real. But a lot of that does impact our culture. So I guess we do need to have a lot of more. And then, like I say, your Robo say though, Dr. Olivia Hastings.
That's right, Dr. Olivia. Yes, that was a positive representation for women. Exactly. As well, absolutely.
So when you think about it, I guess The Young and the Restless was ahead of the game on that. Just
they were ahead of their time. We not even
giving us that positive black representation on daytime television.
Quietly.
And they did it quietly.
They did it real low key too, because it's funny how when you make a big thing out of it, it becomes a thing, right? But when you subtle with it, you can really make some positive change. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. Well, fellas, we getting ready to wrap this up. We down to maybe the last few minutes. I want to get your final word, Prince, and then I'm gonna go to EB for his final thought.
I guess from our discussion today, it just shows us that how much even the most subtle things will impact our culture and our view of like where we are and where we're going. So. And like I said, it's nothing against, just we do need to see those raw moments that that a lot of us do live every day. A lot of people just still need to see good times. Even though they had they always had the bad look. They was always trying to get out of the projects, but something always pulled them back into it.
The Jeffersons.
The Jeffersons was the other half of that. They did make it out of the hood and moved on up. And
we all learned that theme song to a certain extent.
Exactly. Like I said, so we do need to see all aspects of that culture, but we shouldn't be like, I guess, like drama porn. Or when you look at the raw aspects, it should be just shine a light on it to make sure that we show that there are people out here that are still struggling and they're trying to make it, but them that there is a way to get out. So, and then that's that way to get out. When we see those representations from those from the six, which would be like I said, the Jetsons and the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and all shows like that. So let's keep striving to make sure we have those positive influences on in our culture.
And EB, with your final thought, brother. Thank you for joining us this evening, man. We know you got a lot going on over there with the young fatherhood, but we appreciate you, brother.
Yeah. Well, that was a slight bedtime hiccup, so you have my apologies.
Oh, it's all good, man. It turned out perfect.
So what? So I want to return briefly. So, one thing we did not mention was Living Single. I think Living Single.
Yes.
Living Single was one of those major golden age shows.
Yep, woman she owning her own magazine, her friend, successful lawyer.
Mm-hmm. And I would welcome a show like that again. Living Single was it for me. I watched that a lot. What I would say is, when we talk about the culture, I want people to consider the shared fabric of our existence. Common accents or turns of phrase or looks, or when I say looks, I mean when you look at someone and you share a thought, or or even common gestures. These are things that define a culture, define what a culture is, and those
that silent communication.
Exactly. And go ahead.
I'm sorry. I didn't want to interrupt you, but I kind of thought of something that a friend told me once. Like with the head bob. It's kind of like a universal greeting for Black men. It seems it's like we always do that, even if we don't know the person. It's just like that's our way of. That's part of our culture too.
Even the fist bump that got so popular during the global pandemic, we've been doing the fist bump forever. That's a part of our culture.
Right. So I mean, and to I guess give a fundamental example, it's all of these things we've been talking about they form the strands or the threads of the shared fabric of our social reality, of what forms the basis for what we call the culture or our culture. And it creates the common understandings that we share through those turns of phrases, through the gestures, through the common experiences, even though we may have come from different cities. So those are. I want people to consider that in terms of what we want to do going forward, and like examples, what we consider good examples, what we consider bad examples. And this fabric, it's not this fabric that we consider reality. And forgive me if I'm being incredibly abstract through this whole discussion.
You good, man.
But I mean, it essentially binds us together through not just in the current time, but to like things like Louis B. Armstrong, like the Harlem Renaissance,
across eras.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, church and the culture is something that's a whole other discussion.
Yeah, that may be part two. That
might be part two. We got to continue this series, man.
Yeah, that's 2 or 3 discussions.
Yeah, we got to definitely continue this series, man. Well, I thank y'all, man, for joining us for the Electorate Political Talk Radio. Thank you, Prince. Thank you, EB. Like I said, we left a lot on the table, so we're going to have to come back, y'all. We coming back. So thank y'all for joining us. This has been the Electorate Political Talk Radio, and this episode has been Defining the Culture. So if you're just not tuning in, you can catch us on YouTube at the Electorate Political Talk Radio page. So y'all definitely check us out. And man, we appreciate y'all being here with us, man. Prince, EB, y'all got anything else?
said, let's come back for part 2 in the church. Let's talk about the church, I guess.
Yeah, that's gonna be a good one, man. Oh, y'all got my mind is racing just thinking about it, man.
Well, unfortunately, I think that breaks some of my social rules about discussing religion and politics with friends, but I guess I've already broken that rule since this is political talk, right? Anyway, right. So no, thanks for having me on.
We'll keep it civil.
Oh yeah. Well, thank y'all. This has been the Electorate Political Talk Radio, and we out. If you, like I said, if you missed the show, catch us on YouTube. Peace.